Alright, the purpose of today's lab is to give you practice at perhaps one of the two most important techniques for you to learn as a chemist, and that's the use of the pipette. Pipettes are instruments used to deliver very accurately a set volume of liquid. You use a pipette when you know how much liquid you want to use to make a solution or to perform a reaction. So you're measuring a volume of liquid to deliver it to something else. That's the purpose of a pipette. You wouldn't use it to measure the volume of an unknown sample or anything like that. You're going to use it in a scenario where your reaction calls for 10 milliliters of hydrochloric acid, right? You're going to use the pipette to measure out that 10 milliliters of hydrochloric acid. In general, pipettes are considered much more precise measuring devices than graduated cylinders when it comes to the delivering of a liquid. The next couple slides are going to tell you how to use and clean a pipette. Beep. There are two types of pipettes. The first type of pipette is a volumetric pipette. A volumetric pipette delivers only one volume, but delivers it very accurately. As a general rule, a volumetric pipette is accurate to at least the hundredths place of a milliliter. The second type of pipette is a graduated pipette. A graduated pipette generally is calibrated to the is generally calibrated to the tenth of a milliliter. You can estimate the 100th, but it's capable of delivering a variable volume of liquid. Your standard deviation of repeated measurements is likely to be higher using a graduated pipette compared to a volumetric pipette. That's why people will generally use volumetric pipettes when they know they want to deliver exactly 10 milliliters or exactly 5 milliliters or exactly 20 milliliters. You'd use a graduated pipette more in a scenario where you're wanting to measure, give an odd amount, 3 milliliters, and it doesn't have to be to the hundredths place of a milliliter in terms of precision. The focus of our lab is going to be how to use a volumetric pipette. A volumetric pipette has either a red line at the very top, you can see it in the photo there, or it has a white etched mark at the very top. This represents the fill line. When the bottom of a liquid's meniscus touches the top of that red line, the pipette is full and contains exactly 10.00 milliliters. In addition to having a fill line, you'll also notice that pipettes have this sort of wide bulge in the middle. The majority of the liquid is held in this wide bulge. It's very tempting to hold the pipette by this wide bulge. Matter of fact, if I'm not careful, even with years of practice, I want to hold it in that nice big bulge there. But you shouldn't do that. It's considered bad technique because you're insulating the majority of your liquid by your hands, and therefore you're changing its density compared to what the density was in your beaker. So you want to avoid holding the pipette by that thick bulb there. You want to hold it either by the right below the bulb or right above the bulb. Try to avoid holding it to the bulb. Notice in this picture we're looking at a 10 milliliter pipette, and that 10 milliliter pipette holds 10.00 milliliters with a standard deviation of plus or minus 0.04 milliliters. So we're talking about a very precise measuring tool for delivering a volume of liquid. An important thing to do before you use a pipette is to clean it. Most of the time that whenever you're working in a chemistry lab, you want to make sure your glassware is clean, particularly your pipettes. To clean a pipette, it's a multi-step process. First, you want to rinse it out with some warm soapy water. Then you want to clean out that soapy water by filling it and draining it 10 times with distilled or deionized water. On each one of your rinses, you should blow out the liquid at the tip of the pipette. You blow out that water at the tip of the pipette using either a pipette pump or a bulb. Never use your mouth to blow out the end of a pipette. You should make sure that every single bit of liquid is out of that pipette. By your last rinse, the only liquid that you should have to blow out of your pipette should be at the very bottom. The sides of your pipette should have no liquid clinging to them if they are truly clean. After you've cleaned it 10 times with water, you want to fill the pipette with a very small amount of reagent, no more than 1 milliliter. You want to then rinse the inside of the pipette with that milliliter of reagent. You're going to do that by turning the pipette on its side. You have to be careful not to spill stuff. Turn it on its side, rotating it around, and tilting it gradually up and down so the water rolls around all over the inside of that. That way you're coating the surface with the reagent that you're going to be using the pipette to measure. You want to do this 5 times to remove any trace of water that may dilute your reagent. Even though you're rinsing it 5 times, you're using less than 5 milliliters of reagent. So even if you were pipetting, say, somebody's blood, you're not having to take too much extra from them in order to coat and properly clean your pipette. Your pipette should now be ready to be used with your reagent. Make sure that each of your rinses have been blown out the bottom. Make sure there's no liquid left in there. This will be different from what I'm going to tell you in a few minutes. I'm going to tell you in a few minutes that when you're measuring, you never blow out a pipette. But when you're cleaning a pipette, you want to make sure that you blow it out the bottom. Why don't you write down Greedo? Write down the word Greedo. I hope you've written down the word Greedo, who hung out in a really dirty canteen. Greedo. Beep. Pipetting has made leaps and bounds in the days since I was an undergraduate. One of these leaps and bounds has been in the design of the bulb. It used to be you just use this thing that looked like a giant nose picker as a bulb, no bells and whistles. Now you guys get to use a much more complex bulb that has a lot of benefits. Here's a picture of your bulb, and you'll notice that you have 3 buttons labeled A, S, and E. They each have their own function. So let's start at the beginning. Your pipette goes in the bottom. It has to go in nice and tight to make sure that there's a vacuum. To fill the bulb, you're going to hold the A button and press the bulb down. This makes your bulb go flat and creates a vacuum potential. Then to draw liquid into your pipette, you press the S button, and water will be sucked up into your pipette. You want to make sure that your liquid goes above your fill line. The reason being is once you remove it from the liquid, you may or may not see a little bit of a bobbing effect due to air pressure differences. Alright, once you've removed the pipette from your liquid, then hit the E button very carefully. You don't want to just clamp down it, but you want to use the E button to very gradually lower your meniscus until the top of the meniscus is equal, until the bottom of the meniscus is equal to the top of the fill line. Once you've done that, you have exactly 10 milliliters or 5 milliliters or however much your pipette holds in the pipette. Now you're going to move the bottom of your pipette to your other container and drain all the liquid from the pipette by holding the E button. You'll hold the E button, the liquid will come out the pipette. What you'll notice is that there's a little bit of liquid left in the tip of your pipette. Pipettes are made to contain that little bit of extra liquid, so don't knock it out or don't blow it out using the bulb. Now that's really hard to understand just reading my words and listening to me talk. So on the next slide I have a quick YouTube video for you to watch. But the best video for you to watch ever would be made by George Lucas. So why don't you write down the word Lucas, L-U-C-A-S, Lucas. Once you've written down the word Lucas, you can move on to the next slide. Beep.